Welcome to the Website Investor. I'm Jeff Hunt, and today we're going to talk about when it might be better to build to start from scratch than to buy an online business. Now, you probably know, and this is the Website Investor, that I am a big fan of buying and not just building, but there are definitely times and situations where you might want to build instead of buy. So we're going to kind of talk about what some of those situations might be. And the very first one is simply this: you have no cash. Right? You don't have the funds, and anytime you buy a website, websites have great ROI, return on investment, but the immutable law is where there's great ROI, there's also risk involved. So if you have no money, you have very limited money, you don't want to risk it, then build, don't buy. That's kind of the first scenario. But there are many other reasons that you might want to build from scratch versus buying. My first website was, my first successful website, I should say, was a news website, and I bought it, and I learned the business model. So in cases where you know the business model well, you know how to operate, you know what you can expect from the business in terms of financial returns and the effort that's going to be required. Once you know the business model, that's a good reason to, in the future, build instead of buy. I bought several news sites, a number of them, but I actually ended up over the years building more news sites than I bought. So that's one reason that you want to build, is when you already know the business model and you can kind of visualize what the steps are, you understand the investment that's going to be required in terms of time and effort and money versus what the returns are. That's a really good situation where you're going to build instead of buy, or maybe you do some of both. Another situation where you would want to build potentially is where the payback comes a lot more quickly. And particularly, these are business models where you have paid traffic, paid customer acquisition that can be ramped up very fast and don't require like a waiting period or sort of a maturation period, or not as much of one. One example for me was a guy came to me, says, "Hey, help me evaluate this website." It was an arbitrage website, traffic arbitrage, where we were actually advertising arbitrage business. And it was several $100,000. And we looked at it, and I just told him, look, this is a situation where it'd probably be better to build yourself and replicate the model of this business than to spend $250,000 and buy into it. And so we agreed to actually work on it together, and after about 6 weeks we had the site in place, and then our first 30 days we actually netted about $10K in profit, and the business ramped up very quickly, and then we doubled that a few months later. And so that was the situation where building was clearly the better model. It doesn't mean you would build every arbitrage. I mean, there might be cases where you would want to buy an arbitrage business rather than build it, but that was a situation where because it was a paid source of traffic and we had a pretty good handle on what the business model looked like, that it was good to go ahead and build and not buy. Another situation is when you want to be the face of your brand. You want your name and your picture and yourself, your personality, to be sort of the corner piece of the thing that you're building, because you may be selling services, or you may just be giving advice and you want to do it under your own name and your own personality. Then you're going to want to build. Now, you might be able to augment that business by buying audiences or synergistic, similar kinds of businesses, or that have email lists or a following or whatever to augment the business. But if you're going to be the brand, then you're probably going to build and not buy. Another situation is when you're primarily interested in learning and you have time, your end goal isn't necessarily to build and grow a great big business, or at least not the one that you're starting with, then maybe you want to have the experience of the technical initial setup of the website and sort of the tools and techniques that you need to attract your first visitors, to get them on an email list or to engage with them on social media. And so in that case, maybe building is a good thing to do for you. Now, you can also learn, and I argue that learning from buying is also very effective and efficient, because when you buy, there's already a working model, and you can focus your learning on the areas where that model needs to be improved. But certainly, there's tons that you learn in the process of building a business of any kind, and particularly online business, that you might not learn another way other than actually doing it from scratch. So that's a very legitimate time when you want to build versus buy. And another situation is when you're not in a hurry. You have a lot of time. You're not worried about the opportunity cost of spending your time like building a business. And if you're in that situation, maybe building and doing it at your own pace and your own way is perfectly reasonable. You don't really need to fast track the process by investing capital in a business that you buy. And yet a final reason might be that you're trying to do something very unique. You have a product, a process, something in mind that's kind of different than other things that are out there. And so you want to build it from scratch so that you can customize it just the way you want. Now be careful with that. That can be a trap. In most cases, you're not quite as unique as you think. And there are probably other people who are similar enough, or other businesses that you might buy that you could tweak or mold into that thing that you have in mind that you're trying to create, or that service that you want to get. But there may be legitimate cases where you're doing something quite different, and building from scratch is really the best and easiest way to make that happen, to create that thing that you envision, that service, that way that you're going to help people. So those are the few reasons that you would want to start from scratch and build rather than buy. Of course, I've got a lot of reasons to buy and a lot of situations that it would be better to buy in than to build, and we'll cover that in another session. Go to flipminds.com/today for resources for your online business, and we'll see you next time.